We are back with the best games of Week 3 of the Smogon Champions League. Smogon Champions League is an elite competitive Pokemon tournament with tiers from Ubers to PU and Little Cup and Smogon doubles. And this week we finally have an Ubers game in the recap and we finally have an RU game. Also, make sure to subscribe for more of these recaps. We're almost at 100k subscribers, which I'm really excited about. But let's start off with OU and we have Blunder versus Devin. Blunder is 0-2 looking for his first win, and he brings a bulkier style of team with a Sand team and the uncommon Umbreon and then defensive staples like Toxapex and Corviknight. The main offense is through Swords Dance Excadrill and Choice Specs Dragapult. Devin is using a balanced team too, and Ferrothorn plus Heatran is a very common idea and it really puts pressure on Blunder's team. Ferrothorn can get spikes up, so it's almost like you have to defog versus it, otherwise you're in for a very bad time when you take damage on every single switch. But every time you need to defog, Heatran can come in and throw off powerful attacks. Even though it's a water type, Toxapex does not beat Heatran because Heatran can use Magma Storm to trap it and then use Earth Power to beat it 1v1. Devin uses a Pharaoh into Heatran tactic to bring it in, but then it reveals Eruption. Hippowdon with special defense EVs can take on Magma Storm Heatran, but it can't take on Eruption Heatran because Eruption does far more damage. Then, it reveals it has Magma Storm too, which means neither Toxapex or Hippowdon can beat it. He goes to Dragapult and takes a lot of damage and forces it to switch with Hydro Pump. It's a temporary solution, but now Dragapult isn't a switch-in anymore. After the Eruption reveal, it's a losing game to get into the Ferrothorn plus Heatran cycle, and it requires a change in strategy. Instead of playing passively around the Ferrothorn, he accepts that spikes are going to go up, and he uses it as a chance to get his own Stealth Rock. Then he U-turns on a Ferrothorn switching out to gain momentum. In this situation, momentum is more valuable than defogging and stopping the 18% of damage every switch. Devin goes for a nasty plot with Rotom Wash and Toxapex reveals Toxic. He uses Umbreon with Protect and Toxapex to stall out Rotom Wash and rack up poison damage before it switches out. Heatran comes in next and Rotom Wash did a lot of damage before switching out and Heatran picks up a KO. He has to use Excadrill to revenge kill Heatran and he reveals a game changer. Air Balloon on Excadrill. That means Hippowdon does not beat it 1v1. And Blunder lost a lot of HP on Toxapex and Umbreon to weaken Rotom Wash. All that combined means that all of a sudden Devin's team is really weak to Excadrill. Blunder Swords Dances on Ferrothorn and does it once again once he realizes it can't touch him, and from there it's a clean win for Excadrill. He uses Rapid Spin to increase his speed even outside of Sand, and from there nothing can avoid the one-hit KO and Blunder moves to 1-2, and his team coincidentally also moves to 1-2, getting the first win of the season. Now we have Ubers, which we haven't had a lot of yet, and we see a Trick Room team. Trick Room teams are overall not very good in singles, but if there's ever a tier to use it in, it would be the Ubers tier. A lot of legendaries have naturally high speed, and there are some powerful slower Pokemon like Calyrex Ice and Dracovish. Exaline's team also has none of the big three on it. It's a high risk and honestly not necessarily a high reward strategy. In this game, the biggest threat is going to be Ferrothorn. Ferrothorns often use Iron Defense Body Press, which can be challenging to break with Pokemon like Dracovish. The game starts off Necrozma vs Hatterene. Necrozma flinches the Hatterene and denies the Trick Room, and then he has to switch to Porygon 2 to get the Trick Room up. But Trick Room from Porygon 2 is pretty obvious, so Necrozma can try and get a Stealth Rock up there. Exaline predicts the Stealth Rock, but Satomb predicts the Hatterene and knocks it out. Now nothing can stop the Stealth Rock as P2 goes for Trick Room. Then P2 tries to teleport, which always moves last, but gets paralyzed by Thunder Wave and that's a huge problem. Trick Room is already on a short timer, but every turn wasted trying to teleport P2 out means that timer gets shorter and shorter. Also, every teleport risks a combination of Iron Head Flinch and Paralysis. He recovers instead of teleporting because at this point 3 turns is not enough. He has to set it up in such a way that he gets as many turns as he can. He's going to run out all these turns and try again later. Satomb switches to Pharaoh as P2 gets paralyzed again going for the teleport. He has to waste Trick Room again to get it up later, and meanwhile Ferrothorn gets all the spikes up. And then it uses Iron Defense, and at this point it's almost over. Ferrothorn is basically unstoppable now. He tries to attack with Dracovish and it does nothing, and for the first time in my life I get to use the words Ferrothorn Sweep. Fortunately for him, it wasn't all that bad though. Exaline's team would win the week 8-2. We now have an RU game between McMegan, one of the all-time greats, and Floss, who won the most recent RU Open. Both of them are 2-0, and if you've watched the Week 2 recap, you'd remember how deadly Rotom Mo stab combination can be. Here, Floss tricks his opponent. When he uses Volt Switch and Seismitoad blocks it, it looks like he's most likely Choice Specs or Choice Scarf. After all, you wouldn't use Volt Switch on a Nasty Plot moveset. But then he reveals he wasn't Choice Locked and KOs the Seismitoad with Leaf Storm. All of a sudden, there are huge problems. There are 2 electric types now, but no ground type to stop it. Crobat and Togekiss are both vulnerable to electric types, and there's no easy solution. If you try to go to Umbreon, a Pokemon with high special defense, to take on the electric type Pokemon, Volt Switch would bring in Pangoro, who can cause massive destruction. Pangoro is the ultimate slow but powerful wall breaker. Even though it's strong, its weakness is that sometimes it can be hard to bring into the game. Volt Switch onto Umbreon is a great way to bring in Pangoro. Pangoro is able to rip holes through the team, and to make matters worse, Rotom Mo reveals Nasty Plot and Pain Split, which means it can keep itself healthy. Rotom Mo crashes in, doing enough damage, and Raikou finishes the job, and Floss moves over to 3-0 where he leads the RU pack. Unfortunately, his team did lose the week 2-8. We now have NU with PokéMD, where he's actually playing my team's player Ziri. Ziri's biggest threat is Choice Specs Inteleon, which is basically unstoppable in this matchup with Hydro Pump and Ice Beam. If it can get into attacking positions, it can dominate the game. For Ziri, the game is going to be about creating those positions. But there's a small wrinkle, and that is Exeggutor Alola. Exeggutor is weak to Ice Beam, but it's perfectly fine versus water type attacks. It can do a lot of damage versus Ziri's team because there's also a Scrafty. Scrafty can pretty reliably force Talonflame to get knocked off. Then with Stealth Rock, Exeggutor can threaten KOs on almost everything. AIM reveals physically attacking Exeggutor, which means it's not the more common Choice Specs moveset. Inteleon gets in a good spot and picks up a KO too, and at this point they're basically trading kills, and it's going to be about positioning. Who's going to get their KO first? Exeggutor expecting Ice Beam reveals Endure, which means it's most likely Custap Harvest Exeggutor Alola to try and always attack first by getting a new Custap Berry every turn. Ziri figured out something weird was going on, and U-turned out to avoid activating any sort of berry. The game becomes a game of trades, and it reaches an endgame. Harvest has a 50% chance to activate, but it can pick up on the turn it activates, and then it can pick up on the turn of Endure, overall creating more than a 75% chance, because you can try to Endure again and again too. AIM gets a Custap off on the Endure, and then finishes in style with a Dragon Hammer. AIM moves to 3-0 on the season, and his team would win the week too. Last but not the least, we have a Little Cup game between Ace Hunter and Well.IU, where Ace Hunter is using an interesting no Mianfu team. He has an offensive download Porygon, but Well.IU reveals he has a defensive Trace Porygon. Ace Hunter makes a good play and knocks off versus a Mianfu predicting Sucker Punch and hits the opposing Poniard, knocking off its Choice Scarf. Then he threads the needle and goes to Natu on a predicted Brick Break to force out Poniard with the threat of Heat Wave. Defensive Porygon can be annoying to deal with when you don't have a fighting type. At best, you can try and knock it off with Poniard and then try to overpower it with powerful attackers. Interestingly, Ace Hunter is just spamming Roost versus Porygon, which is a very neutral play. It doesn't accomplish anything because realistically PP isn't going to be a factor here, and at the same time it's not a huge risk because their crit doesn't change the game state too much. He's actually doing it to gain timer. Pokemon Showdown's timer adds time per move, and he was playing with low timer all game, and he used this as a chance to get more time on the clock. Then he goes to Poniard to knock off Porygon. He can't really break it too well, but then he makes a huge blunder. He forgets that earlier the Porygon traced Magic Bounce off of Natu, he Stealth Rocks on the Porygon and gets it bounced back. He later traps the Porygon with Trapinch, but that Stealth Rock damage on Staryu is crucial. But here is where Ace Hunter gets to attack. He is Life Orb Staryu, and without defensive Porygon, there's nothing to stop it. Well.IU goes to Mianfu, but he doesn't have Fake Out. That means Staryu is able to just keep picking up more and more KOs. But then, once Staryu is at low enough health, he goes to Poniard and reveals he was actually Choice Scarf Sucker Punch Poniard, and because of Stealth Rock, he does just enough damage to get the Staryu to its death. And from here it's over. Nothing can stop Drillbur anymore because it's just too strong. Except for a critical hit. Ace Hunter gets the critical hit to KO Drillbur, and it sets up a very interesting Mareanie vs Mianfu dynamic. Nobody knows Mianfu's last move. Is it Taunt to deny recover, or is it Stone Edge to hit Larvesta? If Marini wastes a turn to recover as it gets taunted, it loses, but on the other hand, if it's Stone Edge Mienfoo and you don't recover, you lose too. You have to make your predict and he guesses wrong. He doesn't recover and it turns out it wasn't Taunt Mienfoo. He loses now. But then in a twist of fate, he dodges high jump kick to win the match. A close game ultimately decided by the critical hit, and Ace Hunter's team would win the week 7-3. Thank you for watching, and the standings are on your screen now. Let me know what your favorite game of the week was down in the comments below.